echoes in the dark. The storm didn't begin with a crack of thunder, but with a low, grinding rumble of a truck's engine beneath the flickering light of an old gas station. It was the kind of place you find on forgotten highways, where the air hangs thick with the smell of diesel and the silence feels heavier than the night itself. Just after sundown, a black Freightliner rolled in, its presence a hushed warning whispered into the wind. The driver, a man named Silas Thorne, was a study in quiet strength. He was broad-shouldered in a worn utility jacket, and he moved with deliberate calm that came not from a need to evade, but from years of honed observation. He stepped down from the cab without a hint of hurry, a figure of pure purpose. As he swiped his card at Pump 7, nothing about him shouted trouble. Yet for the two local cops parked across the lot in a dusty cruiser, that very lack of theatrics was reason enough. Officers Jeb Carver and Liam Vance had been sitting in their patrol car for 20 minutes, sipping lukewarm coffee. Carver, a man whose smirk was as well-worn as his belt, adjusted his weapon. "Look at that. Another out-of-state rig," he muttered to his partner. "What do you think? He's hauling cigarettes or something stronger?" Vance said nothing, his eyes fixed on the approaching truck. Carver, however, tossed his cup and opened the door. "Let's go say hi," he said, the words a clear challenge. Silas looked up as they approached. There was no fear in his eyes, no smile, just a steady, penetrating gaze that had seen this exact scene unfold countless times before. "Evening, officers," he said calmly, his voice a low, even tone. "Is there a problem?" Carver stepped a little too close, his shadow falling over Silas. "You tell me. Got a reason to be parked here, getting diesel like most trucks do." "I have paperwork on the load," Silas replied, his posture unchanged. "But I wasn't pulled over, was I?" Carver's jaw tightened. He didn't like being challenged, especially by someone who sounded so unshakably calm. "Mind popping that trailer open for us?" Silas raised an eyebrow. "Do you have a warrant?" "We can get one," Carver shot back. For a tense moment, the only sound was the incessant hum of the overhead lights and the frantic buzz of insects drawn to their flicker. Then Silas spoke again, his voice a low, steady suggestion. "Are you sure you want to do this right here?" Carver let out a humorless laugh. "Is that a threat?" "Not at all," Silas replied. "Just a suggestion. You might want to check your mirrors before you reach for that latch." Carver blinked, confused. "What mirrors?" Silas gestured subtly toward the cab. Hidden among the chrome were 3 tiny camera lenses, each already blinking a steady red. And on the back window, barely visible unless you knew where to look, was a small, silver decal, a government asset tag. Carver's expression flickered, the bravado draining from his face as he realized the implication. "Who are you?" he asked, his voice now a strained whisper. "Someone sent here for people like you," Silas replied, his head tilted slightly, his eyes never leaving Carver's. Before Carver could react, a black, unmarked SUV rolled up silently behind the Freightliner. No lights, no plates, no sirens, just a commanding, unmistakable presence. Carver's hand twitched toward his holster, but Vance grabbed his wrist. "Don't," he whispered urgently. "Not here. Not now." This wasn't just a truck stop. It was a snare. And the man they had intended to intimidate wasn't a target. He was bait, the unseen network. Silas Thorne, a senior field investigator with the Justice Department's Civil Rights Division, wasn't new to this kind of tension. He stood in the fading light, one hand resting casually at his side, as Carver fumed in place, his posture radiating a dangerous mix of anger and confusion. Vance, meanwhile, was all nervous energy, his eyes darting from the silent SUV to the sealed envelope one of its occupants had placed on the hood of their cruiser. Inside the trailer, there was nothing illegal, just ordinary bottled water and packaged goods. But hidden between the cases were cables, transmitters, and high-resolution recorders wired into every corner of the vehicle. Silas wasn't hauling freight. He was hauling proof. And these 2 officers, by their actions and words, had just walked right into his trap. Just 10 minutes earlier, Carver had been bragging about how easy it was to shake down late-night drivers in their town of Cypress Creek. Sometimes as a trucker too tired to argue. Most people just pay to avoid trouble, he'd said. But Silas Thorne wasn't most people. Vance finally broke the silence. "Is there a supervisor we can talk to?" he asked, his voice wavering slightly. Silas met his gaze. "Not one you can reach by radio." Vance swallowed hard. Rumors of federal stings in their small, corrupt department had always been dismissed as paranoid fiction. They'd never thought it would come here. Not to their quiet town. Not to them. "Let me make it plain for you," Silas said, his voice low and steady. "This truck, this stop, this entire location, it's been flagged, monitored, and recorded by federal authorization. Your body cameras, if you're even wearing them, aren't the only ones rolling tonight." Carver turned slowly, his face a mask of shock. "Your FBI?" Silas didn't answer. A passenger door in the SUV opened, and a man in a dark suit stepped out, placing a sealed envelope with a federal seal on the cruiser's hood. He returned to his vehicle without a word. "What is that?" Vance asked, his voice barely a whisper. "You'll want to read it before morning," Silas replied. Finally, Silas turned back to his truck. "I've got a long drive ahead," he said, "but you'll be hearing from us again. This stop wasn't the last." With that, he climbed back into the cab, the engine rumbling to life, smooth and steady. He pulled away, leaving behind two officers in the quiet collapse of their assumed immunity. The aftermath. The next morning, Carver and Vance were called into the station. The atmosphere in the conference room was cold. The chief's smile was gone, and two federal agents sat at the head of the table. On a screen, a live, time-stamped video feed was playing. It showed Carver's hand reaching for the trailer latch, his face contorted in a sneer. Another clip showed Vance standing by silently, his hands in his pockets, doing nothing to intervene. "This is a preliminary review," the lead agent said, his voice even. "What comes next depends on how honest you're willing to be. Starting now." Carver started to speak, but Vance raised a hand. "We didn't know who he was," he said, his voice clear and steady. "But that's not an excuse. We knew better. We just thought no one was watching." Silas Thorne wasn't there to watch the fallout. His job was to document the cracks, not to witness the collapse. He was already hundreds of miles away, on to the next case. He filed his final report in a quiet office, a small, faded photo taped to his desk. His younger brother, smiling in a cap and gown. He had joined the Bureau because of his brother, because he knew that in a world where some people were judged for nothing more than their appearance, someone had to be the one watching. Justice, he knew, didn't always arrive with sirens or courtroom speeches. Sometimes it arrived quietly, in the form of a man who refused to be intimidated, a truck that was more than it seemed, and a story that reminded everyone that quiet strength can be the most powerful force of all.